Instacart shoppers know groceries. They know that you can't make guacamole with rock-hard avocados. They know how to quickly find those peanut butter pretzels you can never find. And they keep you in the know by giving you updates about your order along the way. Let Instacart shoppers help take shopping off your plate so you can get time and energy back for what really matters. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Instacart. Add life to cart.
Football Gods is the podcast where we give celebrity fans ultimate power over the beautiful game.
You can hear Ian Brodie choose his ultimate football anthem.
I think You'll Never Walk Alone, which is a song about community, being together. I don't think you could have a better song.
And understand, above all else, what annoys Nader Manuoha.
A player who solely plays for themselves, but from the outside is perceived as being great for the team. Like, some of these guys are the most toxic people you could ever wish to play with.
Search the Football Gods wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AI Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
You and me and Guy are all in a stonking good mood.
Yes, despite the early hour. Well, it's not really early, but it's early for me, especially when I had to make a late night journey last night to rescue my very stupid old parents. Karl Matchett, we are here today to discuss Liverpool versus Chelsea in the EFL Cup final. However, before we get to that, let's just touch on the Champions League action this week. So, obviously, last week we had 4 games. They were all a damp squib, really. This week we had 4 games. These look like the better 4 games, and yet they've all really been a bit of a damp squib as well. So PSV 1, Dortmund 1 is where I'd like to start. The only really notable thing about this game is that Mats Hummels took to Twitter afterwards to complain about the penalty PSV were given.
Yeah, I mean, this game I think should have been the most liveliest, because I think both teams should realistically have been thinking that they could get through, given their respective form. Like Dortmund may be the bigger side and the bigger league and all that, but PSV have the better form for the year. So I think it was maybe a little bit disappointing that both of them didn't really go for it. Second leg to come and all the rest of it, so more emphasis on PSV perhaps, but I don't know. I just feel... Basically, I think one of them are going to feel this was a massive missed opportunity. Obviously, that would be the case whichever way the second leg goes. But now I'm leaning much, much more towards PSV. You maybe should have done quite a bit more on this. Like they weren't bad. They had plenty of chances first half, especially. But I just expected a bit more from them, really.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, especially considering their form in the Eredivisie, where they are absolutely unstoppable. 20 wins, 2 draws from their 22 games thus far. With 12 games to go, they're 10 points clear. And you could argue it's the most impressive league performance of anyone in Europe right now, just given the actual percentage of wins from games played. Inter Milan 1, Atletico Madrid 0. Atleti clearly went there looking for a nice, dull 0-0 draw to bring home, and very nearly got it. Now, Inter did play some decent football, but at the same time, it was a rather uninspiring game for the neutral.
let's be honest, Dave. The only reason you are being kind to call it rather uninspiring is because you like the managers involved. This was a shit match.
Yeah.
No other way to put it. This was an absolutely garbage game. This is the one I watched live, actually. Watched Dortmund back after, but this is the one I was watching live. And honestly, at times this was one of those games that make you lose the will to live. You're looking at the pitch and the quality of some of the individual players and then what they're being asked to do. It was so reductive, so reactive, so just... I know it's the Champions League, but goodness me, we're very early on in the Champions League. I think there's still a bit of scope for a bit of joy, a bit of risk-taking, a little bit of open up your team a bit more. It just wasn't, like you say, into maybe the more adventurous side, certainly had more of the better chances. Lautaro did not have his shooting boots on whatsoever. I thought Thuram was good first half before he obviously picked up a groin injury right at the end of that half. But by and large, I think there are really only about 3 players on the pitch who I actually thought played well. Like Bastoni played well, and he was quite bright. He was getting forward loads, did some good work in the channel, even getting beyond Dimarco. Çalhanoğlu was all right at times as well. Zoma had a good game in goal, obviously, doing a couple of little bits. But not lots. There wasn't really loads that either goalkeeper had to do, to be honest. Like the goal itself came from a defensive mix-up. Even that was not a good finish. It was a good save by Oblak, and obviously fairly fortunate that Arnautovic, still a human, still footballing, managed to get on the end of it and score. I think Inter should have been much more offensive-minded than they were. I don't think that they have the team. If this is how they approach big games again in Europe, then who are going to go to the final or go anywhere near the final? I don't know that Atletico are going to win the second leg, to be honest. I think this Inter side are going to be able to do what Atleti tried to do in the first leg. That's how I feel about what we've seen so far from Atleti this season.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. When you look at that Atleti team, it's not all that inspiring. I mean, Oblak is still great. Witsel is years past being a player of this level. Jimenez, the injuries have worn him down significantly. Hermoso's never been great. De Paul I like, but again, he's a player who's sort of at the end of his prime. Koke's the same. Saul has bounced back well from those bad couple of seasons, but this was not a good performance. Molina and Lino, they're okay, but they're not elite level players. I wouldn't say they're both good players, but they're not elite level. Griezmann is still world class, but like he's playing up front with Llorente, who's a midfielder and was a defensive midfielder early in his career. Really not inspiring stuff, Atleti. I just don't understand how Inter, with those players, are not far more offensive. I mean, Pavard is one of the best passing centre-backs in Europe. Bastoni is another one who would fall into that category. Tremendous at getting forward. In the midfield 5, you've got Barella, who's more offensive-minded than defensive-minded. Çalhanoğlu plays as their deepest midfielder. He was a number 10 up until a couple of years ago. Mkhitaryan is a number 10 by nature. Fede DiMarco is a natural winger. And then you've got Thuram and Lautaro up front. I just don't understand how a team with that much attacking talent and that much potential firepower isn't more front-footed and more aggressive and more willing to take chances.
Yeah.
But, I mean, because if Simone Inzaghi had this team at Lazio, they would have been, like, must-watch TV most of the season. But they're just not. So, yeah, the second leg won't be one to look forward to. Napoli won, Barcelona won. Robert Lewandowski puts Barca 1 up. Victor Osimhen equalises, a rather uninspiring performance from Napoli, who managed 1 shot on target in the entire 90-odd minutes. Barca will probably feel a little bit unfortunate to not be going home with the lead.
Yeah, I guess so. I've not watched this one back yet, just the highlights. look, to be honest, this is a meeting of two teams who this year would be lucky to be in the Europa League in terms of their performance level. Obviously, the actual standard of La Liga around Barca means they are going to be in the Champions League again next year. I don't see them dropping a couple of places, but quality-wise is just not there at the minute. Obviously, Xavi has sort of lost his way a little bit. The team is not really performing as well as it's capable of doing when you look at the names and the technical quality that they have. Certainly, the tactical level is nowhere near where it should be. This is a team who brought off Rafinha and João Felix off the bench. That should tell you that they have a lot of attacking options, a lot of really good options. People like Gundogan and Frenkie de Jong, Pedri, these are tactically intelligent players. This should be a much, much better team than it is at the minute. You know, Napoli have been poor this year. They've obviously had lots of issues that we went over, managerial changes aplenty and so on and so forth. Barca didn't dominate this match. Like, they had more chances, but possession-wise, they didn't really dominate it. Territory-wise, by the numbers, they haven't dominated and created loads of clear chances. I'll watch this one back because I do think that over the two leagues, this should be quite an instructive tie. But let's be honest, in terms of potential winners, these two would be somewhere near the bottom after, the likes of PSV.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And when you look at that Barcelona team, like Koundé, Araujo, Inigo Martinez, João Cancelo, it's very talented defense. The right side is elite level defensively. The left side, very, very good on the ball. Got Ter Stegen in goal. He's still one of the best keepers on the planet. In the midfield three, you've got Gundogan, Andreas Christensen playing as the sixth, which I actually like, and Frenkie de Jong. Frenkie, for me, is one of the most overrated players in the world. From what he should have been when he was leaving Ajax to what he is now, I'd be very disappointed if I'd spent 75 million on him. Gundo's been a great player for a lot of years, but he is on the downside of his career. You look at that front three, Lamine Yamal, I worry that they're going to break him the same way they broke Pedri, they broke Gavi, they broke Ansu Fati, just overplaying these young players out of some weird desperation to compete with Real Madrid now, rather than sorting their house out, getting their debt manageable and under control. And you've got Robert Lewandowski playing up front, who, great striker, great goal scorer, but they signed him at the tail end of his career and gave him an enormous contract, which really didn't do them any favours because they need to be bringing their wage bill down. I think they've got to reduce it by 57 million for next season. And that this is after already significant reductions to their wage bill, which will tell you how out of control it was. I believe it hit nearly 700 million in Messi's last year, which is absolutely... When you think of ours at maxing out at 350, they're doubling that. And at no point, I would say, in the last 6 years, have they been a better team than us, other than maybe last year when they won La Liga and we were garbage. But it was more down to us being garbage. Absolutely bizarre. The final game then. Now, Karl, some clubs go away to Porto and they win 5-0, 4-1, 5-1. But that type of result is not for everybody. Porto 1, Arsenal 0. An absolutely atrocious game of football with, I think the ball was in play for 51 minutes of the 90. There were 36 fouls in the game, 22 of which were given against Arsenal, who had 65% of the ball. Arsenal had 7 shots, none on target. Porto had 8 shots, 2 on target, including what might well be the best goal the Champions League will see this year, with Galeno bending one in the 94th minute from about 25 yards out. The whip he gets on that ball, that is a sensational goal that had no business being anywhere near that game, because that was not a good game of football at all.
Just for reference, in case anyone hasn't seen it, or indeed if they have, the XG on Galenio's shot there was 3%, which, to put it in context, Origi's left-footed finish in the final of the Champions League against Spurs was 4%, and Messi's free kick against us in the 3-0 first leg was also 4%. So Arsenal have done extremely well to allow that goal to go in stoppage time.
Yeah.
A dominant performance, shall we say, with absolutely no direction. I think that's my summation of what I've seen so far. That midway through watching this one back up to about sort of 60, 70 minutes so far. So I've not quite got to the build-up for the goal yet. I'm saving that one. Arsenal, like you said, 65% possession, a total XG for the game of 0.4.
That's fairly impressive. For a team that have scored, 5 or more goals in 3 of their last 5 league games?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've said before, it's a very different kind of mentality when you're playing European football, when you're playing in the Champions League and so on and so forth. But basically, they've had one chance in this game, one realistic chance in this game, and that's Saliba quite early on, about half an hour in or something like that from fairly close range. And that's it. A header, which didn't go on target. That was their chance to score of the game. So I don't really know whether the approach here from Arsenal has been, let's be mature about this and get a solid away result in Europe and stuff like that. And they haven't, or if they just, froze on the stage as such. I think it was quite revealing, to be perfectly honest. And one of my Chelsea supporting friends, actually, in the lead up to the game, sent me a quote from Gabriel in his pre-match press conference saying, they've reached the stage they want to be on. It's like, I can't quite remember the exact word to use. I'm not sure if it was like the pinnacle or it was probably translated anyway from Portuguese, wasn't it? Because it's Gabriel speaking. So something along those lines anyway. And I'm thinking, you're away to Porto in the last 16. And he was laughing, a Chelsea fan, laughing at Arsenal, given the season that Chelsea are having. You can imagine what he thought of this.
Yeah.
These Arsenal players, we've said it before, they are not yet top-level players.
No.
It's a group which is really performing well, and the improvement in the team is undeniable. But there is a mentality that you have to have before you win shit, and they don't. They're not there yet.
They're not. And you look at last season, the last 10 league games, I believe they took 15 points and got bounced from the Europa League by Sporting in a down season. The year before, last 10 games, I believe they also took 15 points. In both campaigns, they went in to those last 10 games with a very sizable lead to attain what they were setting out to do. Last season, it was win the league. The year before, it was finished in the top 4. And in both campaigns, they bottled it. Now, this is a Porto team having their worst domestic season in about 9 years. And yet, the level of mental preparation just seemed so much higher in Sergio Conceição's team than in Mikel Arteta's team. They knew exactly what they were setting out to do, and they delivered exactly what their manager asked of them. Now, I would still fancy Arsenal to get through. I still think they'll get back to the Emirates and beat them in the second leg and go through.
Agreed.
But at the same time, Porto now have something to hold on to. And they've got a manager who's leaving at the end of the year, who wants to make a bit of an impression in this competition because he's auditioning for other jobs. They've got Pepe, who's at the end of his career, will want to go out with a bit of a bang. You've got the two boys in midfield, Nico Gonzalez and Alan Varela. I couldn't have been more impressed with Alan Varela last night. His ability to control space, shut off passing lanes, win his battles. As we look forward with Liverpool, who's going to be, if it's Alonso, if it's Amorim, who's going to be the double pivot partner for Alexis McAllister? That fella is going to feature very highly on my list. We should have bought him last summer when he was going for 10 million. He'll probably cost 50, 55 this coming summer. I was so impressed with him, but I was impressed with Nico Gonzalez as well. Another one who was cast off by Barcelona. And when you watch Barcelona play, they need a combative midfielder, and you're looking at him going, well, why couldn't it just have been him? Not like they got big money for him.
Are you that person who has everything? the coolest merch, and those must-have fan threads? Well, over at our Anfield Index shop, we've gone that extra mile when it comes to pimping up your Liverpool collection. From our popular range of bespoke design t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies and hats, to our signature edition mugs, prints and coasters, all provided with fast worldwide shipping. We have something for every red. We also stock official LFC merchandise and are licensed with the Premier League and UEFA to sell official iron-on shirt badges and sleeve patches. As a listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off everything with coupon code AIPRO10. Just head over to AnfieldIndex.shop or find us on Etsy by searching for Anfield Index.
No, and to be honest, when you basically effectively replace with Oriol Romeu again, what's the long-term upside to that? Bizarre. Anyway, let's leave Barcelona for another day because we could be here all day. But I do want to, just before we move on, ask you a little thing about Arsenal, and not a man-for-man comparison necessarily, and certainly not for the whole team, but the Arsenal back five for that game last night, right? David Raya in goal, Ben White, Saliba, and Gabriel from right to centre, as you'd normally expect, and Jakub Kiwior was the left back this time.
Mm.
At the same time, obviously, we were playing. That's why we're watching these games back later on. Liverpool. How do you think Liverpool's back five of last night compares to this Arsenal five? We had Cruyff in goal. We didn't have either of our first choice fullbacks, and we had, well, I'm going to say not a first choice centre back, but it's a centre back who's come through this season. So we had Bradley, Kwanzaa, Van Dijk, and Gomez.
I would probably take Raya over Kelleher. But it's not an enormous gulf. Now, I understand David Raya is the best in Europe at claiming crosses. That's the one area where he does excel. He has a tremendous command of his penalty area when the ball is in the air. But I look at the other aspects of his game. I don't think he's a great shot stopper. And he's very hit and miss when the ball is at his feet. Now, there's a calmness to him that I do like, but that goes away sometimes. We've seen him get really rattled in games. But I would probably lean him over Kelleher. But he is considerably older than Kelleher. Well, what is he, 28, 29? I think he's 28. Yeah, he's 28. So he's 3 and a bit years older than Kelleher. Like, in that time, I would expect Kelleher to be at that level or better. Ben White and Conor Bradley is a very interesting one. Ben White's a good footballer. I don't think he's a particularly great defender. I note that they paid 50 million for him to be a centre back because Arteta didn't want anything to do with Saliba when he first took over. Wanted Ben White to play next to Gabriel. He's been shunted to right back. Bradley's intensity and his ability going forward is superior. Defensively, they're probably about a wash. Maybe White's a little bit better, just because Bradley's very inexperienced, especially as a fullback, because remember last season when he was on loan at Bolton, he played purely as a wing-back, so it's different defensive responsibilities. I think I'd take Conor Bradley because Conor Bradley cares. I watch Ben White play and I don't know that he cares all that much. He's on the record saying he doesn't like football, doesn't watch it, never watched it as a kid. To me, that's a big red flag. I'd never sign a player who doesn't absolutely love the game. For me, this is like, I watch him and he just doesn't look like he cares. So I think I'd go Bradley. I'm definitely taking Gomez over Jakub Kiwior. Virgil over Gabriel is the most obvious thing in the world. I would take Saliba over Kwanzaa for now. But when I see William Saliba being linked to or being compared to Virgil, it genuinely makes me laugh. William Saliba is closer in level to Jarrell Quansah, much closer to Jarrell Quansah than he is to Virgil. I would take Saliba over Quansah. I'd take Raya over Kelleher, but I'm taking the other three of ours.
I found it very odd looking at that back line of Arsenal's last night and realising I really wouldn't prefer it as a unit to ours that we used last night, given that we had 4/5 of ours not our first choice.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have to accept there's an element of bias because we prefer our players, fine. But even trying to factor that in and even lowering a percentage or two across the board, do I still want our unit that we had or theirs? Do I like the balance of ours or theirs? Do I like the individual traits and how they complement each other of ours or theirs? I pick ours every time. I really do.
And the thing is, I know they've conceded less goals than us in the Premier League, and people will say, oh, well, that means they're better defensively than us. They play a very risk-adverse style of play. We talked about this before. There's a reason so many of their goals are set pieces and counterattacks. That's their game plan. They try and score early, and their primary weapon is set pieces. And from there, they're happy to counterattack. And they're very good on the counterattack, it should be said. They've got really good outlets in Martinelli and Saka, and Jesus knits it together very well. Now, last night, they don't have Jesus. They don't have Jakub Kivor. But David Raya is the first-choice goalkeeper. White, Saliba and Gabriel are all first choice. The midfield that started last night, Odegaard, Rice and Havertz, that is their first-choice midfield. No matter how many times they try and claim that Thomas Partey is part of their first-choice midfield, he isn't. They signed Declan Rice to replace him. And when you tell me all year that Declan Rice is the best six in the league, then you cannot make the case that you're missing Thomas Partey because you've just said that you've got the best six in the league. So how are you missing someone worse than him? You signed Havertz to replace Granit Xhaka. That is the simple fact of it. You've got your two first-choice wingers and you've got Trossard in for Jesus. Trossard has been better than Jesus this season. So while Jesus is a loss, Trossard has been better than him this year. That's an Arsenal team missing two starters. But in one situation, the player who's playing is in better form. And in the other situation, are you really telling me that Zinchenko is making all the difference? Are you telling me that Tomiyasu out of position is making the difference? That Jurriën Timber out of position is making... I keep hearing Arsenal fans try and claim that they've been missing players all season. Jurriën Timber, fair enough. He probably would be a starter, but I asked the question, where? Is it where you have the 50 million right back? Or is it where you have the 35 million left back for most of the year? The right back and left back that they said all of last year were the best in the league. So where is Timber starting? They've had such good fortune with injuries this year. Go through that team. Raya, I think he's missed the games at the start of the year, but since he came into the team, he's missed one game against Brentford because he wasn't allowed to play. White's been fit most of the year. Saliba and Gabriel have been fit all year. Odegaard, Rice, Havertz been fit all year. Havertz, the only game he missed, he was suspended for. Saka missed, I think, 2 games. Martinelli, I think, missed 2 games. You've had your first 11 all season long. So, yeah, you're competing with us at the top of the league. We're missing 7 starters last night. Like you said, we're missing our first-choice goalkeeper, our first-choice right-back, our nominal first-choice left-back is sat on the bench, as is our first-choice partner for Virgil. Virgil is the only one who's probably in Jurgen's idea of his best 11. And we go out and play the way we did. And yeah, I would prefer that defensive unit that we had because of how it functions. than the defensive unit they have, which, I mean, that's 4 centre-backs. I don't care what way you look at it. Ben White's a centre-back, been played as a right-back because you don't trust him as a centre-back. Jakub Kiwior, he's playing because you've got no other option at the moment because the other 3 lads are injured. But it's 4 centre-backs. I'm never going to be on board with 4 centre-backs.
It's auto show time. Hurry into your local Jeep dealer for great offers on your favorite Jeep brand vehicles. Now well-qualified lessees get a low-mileage lease on the 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo X 4x4 for $429 a month for 39 months with $3,755 due at signing. Tax, title, license extra. No security deposit required. Call 1-888-925-JEEP for details. Requires dealer contribution and lease through Stellantis Financial. Extra charge for miles over 32,500. Not all customers will qualify. Residency restrictions apply. Take delivery by 2/29/24. Jeep is a registered trademark.
It is a bit Martin O'Neill 2006, isn't it? Look, we can leave Arsenal behind for another day. And we have indeed left Arsenal behind in the league at the minute, so we can safely turn our attention elsewhere to perhaps another London club even further behind than they are.
Yeah, but just quickly, Eddie Howe, if you can do us a favour at the weekend, we can sort out, the freedom of the city or something for you. You go to London, you take some points off them Saturday night. You'll be forever in our favour. Yes, we play Chelsea this weekend in the EFL Cup. A Chelsea team who to their owners, to their fan base, they're incredibly disappointing because they sit 10th in the league, level on points with Wolves, a point behind a West Ham team who are in dreadful form, 2 points behind the Newcastle team who are very hit and miss, 3 points, I believe, behind Brighton, who are, Brighton, and you've done your very best to try and buy everybody that works for them and plays for them. They sit 10th in the league. They're just wildly inconsistent, Karl. They have lost 10 of their 25 league games. They have conceded 41 goals and scored only 42 goals for a +1 goal difference after 25 games, which, just for a little bit of context, the mighty Reds, after 26 games, +38 in the goal column. Now, they've overcome some teams to get here. They beat AFC Wimbledon in the second round, scraped past them, having gone 1-0 down at home, a Noni Mudeki penalty and an Enzo Fernandez goal putting them through. Then they played the Brighton and Hove Albion reserves, and a Nicholas Jackson goal put them through. Then it was Championship side Blackburn, Badiashile and Sterling gave them a 2-0 win. In the quarterfinal, they played Newcastle. This was around the time that Kieran Trippier was having the worst run of form that any player in the Premier League has had this year. They went 1 down to Callum Wilson. Mudryk scored in the 92nd minute because of Kieran Trippier. They went to penalties, and Kieran Trippier was one of those who missed. They won 4-2. They played Middlesbrough of the Championship in the semi-final. They lost 1-0 away before a 6-1 home win landed them in this final. It's not the most inspiring run. It's not the most difficult run, but they've beaten the teams that have been put in front of them, and you give them credit for that. But if we were even close to full strength, Karl, I would be backing us to beat them pretty heavily, as we did only a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think the first port of call for everybody is basically going to be, can Liverpool play the same way as they did in that game at Anfield? It was like 3 weeks ago at this point. Now, it's obviously, well, maybe a little bit longer than 3 weeks ago. It feels a lot longer than that, but it is not very long ago. So can Liverpool put in a similar level of performance? I think from a technical perspective, yes, but from in terms of the energy that we showed in that game, the relentlessness of it and all of the rest of it, potentially not. You kind of do see a dip in those terms at Wembley, big bad pitch and all the rest of it. the occasion and so on. So maybe not quite the relentlessness of it, and certainly not for the full 90 minutes. You've obviously got the flip side of that in that the other team raised their game and put in a bit more energy themselves and so on and so forth because of the final. And then it's, can Chelsea improve significantly on what they did in that match is the maybe even the bigger side of the question. Now, you have to think that the answer will be yes. From a professional player's perspective, they don't want to be as ridiculed as they were on that day. Mauricio Pochettino is a good coach, so tactically you'd imagine he can come up with something better than he did on that day. And personnel-wise, I don't expect it to be radically different, but they might have one or two things going on that we can talk about now, which actually enforces a little bit of change, which might actually benefit them, if we're being honest.
So their current injury list. Hello, I'm here to annoy you. I'm here to annoy you into listening to more of me and more of others on EPL Index. We don't just have the Anfield Index stuff. We've got EPL Index as well, which covers the entirety of the Premier League. And we have 3 podcasts and a whole bunch of really good writing on EPLindex.com. The podcasts are my own two-footed podcast, which is every day at 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, covering the whole league. We have A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. You know Tadiwa, he does Anfield Index. He presents A Tad Predictable before every Premier League match week. And then Kevin De Vries and his crew on the EPL Roundtable, they're every week after the Premier League match week. So make sure you listen to everything we're doing on EPL Index and follow us there on Twitter at EPL Index. Thank you. Bye-bye. Fofana, Reece James, Badiashile, Lavia, Kukureya, Ogachukwu. Now, of that list, there's Thiago Silva to come as well, so I'll come to him. Of that list, Fofana would probably be a starter, but he has been out all season, so we don't really know. Reece James, obviously, is their club captain. He would be starting, but he does get injured every season. And in his 5 years at Chelsea, he has missed 2 full seasons worth of league games. So that's not great. Badiashile would not be starting over Colwell, in my opinion. Lavia would not be starting over either of the £100 million midfielders they have. When Mark Kukureya played for them, their fans hated him. And Ogachukwu is a kid who wouldn't be starting for them over either of the 100 million midfielders. There is some doubt over Carney Chukwuemeka. Again, he wouldn't be starting over Conor Gallagher, who's been one of the more important players this year. And there is doubt over Thiago Silva. Now, I would argue that not having Thiago Silva improves Chelsea enormously because their defensive line can play that bit higher. You're not having to play a centre-back at right-back to protect him. When you play your defensive line higher, your midfield doesn't have to cover as much ground, which suits Enzo and Caicedo. You can be more aggressive. They can press higher up. They can compress space better. I think not having Silva is actually very important to them in a positive way for them. The team they lined up with at Anfield, Petrovic, Disasi at right back, Silva right side centre back, Badiashile left side centre back, Ben Chilwell at left back. They made a change at half time, took Chilwell off, shunted the other 3 one spot to the left and brought on Malo Gusto at right back. In midfield, they had Caicedo and Enzo. I'd imagine they'll have those 2 starting this weekend. Sterling will start on a wing. Gallagher will start in the 10. My guess is Cole Palmer starts on the other wing instead of Noni Madeki, and Nicholas Jackson starts up front. And I guess the back 4 will be Gusto, Disasi, Colwell and Chilwell with Petrovic in goal. That's what I'm guessing they do this weekend.
Yeah, I'd largely agree. I think whichever way around you want to look at it, whether it's Thiago Silva's injury or whatever, I think that has been a really good thing for Chelsea. I don't know why it took so long to put Malo Gusto at right back. I think he should have been in there quite a while beforehand. But him being there has been positive. Pushing Disasi back into the centre has been positive, and he's actually been in good form as well. So that's, two components of their defence that they can consider fairly locked down at this moment in time, I think. And when you obviously look at Chilwell, he's an automatic starter, so that's 3/4 of it. So I think maybe they've lucked into that, but they've found it. They've got there in the end, and I think that from a Chelsea perspective is obviously a really important start. George Petrovic mentioned earlier in the pod that a Chelsea supporting friend I was discussing with, he thinks that Petrovic will start in goal anyway. Sanchez is back now and he's fit and he's ready to play. Pochettino has said that he's there to be called upon if they want him, but the suspicion is that Petrovic has been good enough and maybe Sanchez was not good enough to warrant coming straight back into the lineup. So again, yeah, I'm going to go with you and say Petrovic starts that one in goal. I think the only maybe slight alteration in attack, and it'll obviously be a bit of a thing that they can change in game as well. Jackson's been starting from the left, running in from the angle, and Sterling obviously up front. So maybe they start that way, but if they need a bit more hold-up play or whatever, then maybe Jackson pushes on.
They do have the Nkunku option as well, so we'll see if he starts, but he hasn't really shone yet this season because obviously he's had 2 injuries, the one that kept him out half the season, and then he's been dealing with something else ever since. So I think they'll probably bring him off the bench. The other factor in the defence as well, you mentioned Ben Chilwell being an automatic starter on the left. That has meant that the Levi Colwill at left-back terrorism has ended, and he's now playing at centre-back, where he's just much, much better because, well, he is a centre-back and not a left-back. So that helps. You look at their form. So they start the season with a draw against us, where, to their credit, they outplayed us. And they got very, very excited by this. And the Chels were back. Then they went and they got stuffed by West Ham. Then they beat Luton. Then they lost at home to Forest. Then they drew away to Bournemouth, who were dreadful at the time. Then they lost at home to Villa. And as you know, losing at home to Unai Emery should be an automatic sacking. They beat Fulham away. They beat Burnley away. They drew 2-2 at home to Arsenal, and they were outstanding for 60 minutes. Genuinely outstanding for 60 minutes, and should have won that game. Then they lost at home to Brentford. Their home form has been honking this season. Went away to Spurs, 6th of November. One of the strangest games of the year. Spurs were ahead. Romero was sent off. Palmer equalised. Udogie was sent off. Van de Ven got injured. Maddison got injured. And it still took Chelsea till the 75th minute to break down 9 men. And then they ended up winning 4-1. And that was kind of the start of Spurs' problems. But it wasn't the end of Chelsea's problems. They did draw 4-4 with City. And again, they were very good in that game. Then they got stuffed 4-1 by Newcastle. Then they beat Brighton 3-2 when Brighton were in horrible form. They lost 2-1 away to United. They lost 2-0 away to Everton. They beat Sheffield United at home. They lost away to Wolves. They beat Palace. They beat Luton. They beat Fulham. They were all excited. The Chels were back. The season starts now. They landed at Anfield on the 31st of January. A Mo Salah-less Liverpool. And they got beaten 4-1. And it should have been more. It really should have been more. It should have been 7 or 8. We were absolutely rampant on the night. Then Wolves went to Stamford Bridge and beat them 4-2. Then they beat Crystal Palace. And then in their last league game, they played really well in the first half against Man City away and got a 1-1 draw. But that is not good. Like, that just isn't good at all. For the money spent, the players they've signed, the fact that they went and they got a manager who's a good manager. Like, he's not some scrub. Maurizio Pochettino is a good manager. But every time I watch them, Karl, I'm just reminded of the fact that do you remember Supermarket Sweep? where you'd have the minute or whatever to run around the shopping centre with your trolley.
As much stuff as you can.
Yeah, and whatever you got in it, that was what you got. That's literally how they approached the transfer windows since Todd Bowley took over. They went and they bought everybody that they could possibly buy with no seemingly no plan as to how it was all going to fit together. So every time I watch them, there's at least one area of the pitch where they've got nominally their first choice players. And I just think this doesn't work at all. Like, the most striking one for me is Enzo and Caicedo in midfield. Individually, they are both outstanding footballers. As a duo, it just doesn't really work. There's too much crossover in their skill sets and in where they want to play. Caicedo excelled with an Alexis McAllister type who could play that bit higher up, could do a multitude of different things. Alexis, obviously, super malleable player, but he could adapt his game to Caicedo. Enzo's best form of his career has come with Florentino Luis next to him, who would be that sort of dynamic, all over the pitch ball winner. But when they play together, they just seem to get in each other's way. And they want to play in the same spaces. They want to be that first line of contact when the defense is looking to play out. Both of them want the ball. Neither of them are comfortable playing that bit higher. And it just doesn't work. And defensively, I just don't feel like they're dynamic enough as a duo, especially going to Wembley, which is a monstrous big pitch. I don't feel like they're dynamic enough for it to work. I feel like if you've got Enzo, the player you want with him is like Manuel Ugarte or an Amadou Onana type of box-to-box runner. With Caicedo, you want an Alexis McAllister. Caicedo Gallagher would probably work better than Caicedo Enzo. And I don't like Gallagher in a double pivot, but I think he'd work better with Caicedo than Enzo does. Individually, they're so good, but collectively, they're just not a good pairing.
Yeah, I think possibly it was Guy I was speaking with about this on another pod, and it was the thought that if you wanted to play both of them together, you kind of have to sacrifice the 10 and put a real sitter, an anchor in behind them. Get very, very offensive-minded fullbacks then who can overlap all the time, and then you've still got your bank of three, basically. You've got the six. You can let Enzo push on, win the ball, and be schemer ahead. You can let Caicedo roam and be a Kante-style ball winner everywhere. And then you can get the best out of them together, but you still have to have that extra layer behind them as such, so that they almost play independently of each other, but both in reference to the six behind them. I think maybe that's the way that Pochettino would have to work it. But then obviously you have the question of which forward do you drop? Because at the minute, Gallagher, like you said, is the one who's knitting everything together. They can't be without him. Feasibly, they could put him as the six and he would do the job, but you don't get the most out of him then. And he's so important to them at the minute because he's the presser, the tactical runner, the tracker backer, the filler inner. He does all the stuff that the rest of this 11 players, which isn't a team, are not doing, which they should be at the minute.
I feel like you could make it work by playing Enzo as the deepest one. And then, like, if you think of the Juve team under Conte, if you play Enzo in the Pirlo role, put Caicedo in the Vidal role, if you could find that Marquisio one, and it could be Gallagher, not to the high level, but it could be Gallagher. But like you said, you'd need to play with really offensive fullbacks. Ideally, you'd want to play with wingbacks, and you'd want to sit three behind them because there will be space to play through them, because there's just going to be space to play through them. But then you're going to have to sacrifice an attack, and they don't have a nine, let alone two players that could make up a front pair. I mean, maybe you'd get away with Sterling and Nkunku and just rely on movement and talent and creativity. But then what do you do with Cole Palmer? He doesn't fit into that shape. And realistically, their fullbacks, if you ask Reece James and Ben Chilwell to play as end-to-end wing-backs, both of them are going to break. And I don't know that they have 3 centre-backs that I trust either. I feel like at some point in the future, there will be university students who write their thesis on Todd Bowley and how not to handle taking over a football club. Because it's just madness, Karl. They're £1 billion into this. £1 billion. He's only been there a year and a half. Well, pushing for 2 years. And they've spent all that money and they're 10th. And if we look at the Premier League table, like how high can they realistically get? 7th? They're not getting any higher than that. They're not catching United, who are 9 points ahead of them, and they're not very good, but they're not catching them. So this is a team that right now has a cap of 7th on it. And yes, you could say, well, if they had Nkunku for the full season, it would be better. Okay, so they might finish 6th, maybe 5th. But you spent £1 billion and you've bought a team that probably maxes out just outside the Champions League spots, or at most you might get 4th if everybody was fit. But there's no such thing as, oh, well, if our players stay fit, when you've got Reece James, who gets hurt every single year. It'd be like us saying, oh, well, if Thiago had stayed fit, we'd have won the league multiple times in the last few years. He's never going to stay fit.
Yeah, and it's an awful lot of what ifs and people who are not fit, considering, you know, everybody else in the league has had injuries. Even Arsenal, who we've just said have been fortunate, they've had the odd couple of players missing as well, and they're still doing what they're doing. So injuries and absences are not an excuse for Chelsea of all people.
They went into this past summer, in my opinion, with three big needs. Like, we knew they had Nkunku coming in, so that was that position taken care of. They had 3 big needs. They needed a ball winner to go with Enzo, someone to complement Enzo. They needed a goalkeeper, and they needed a 9. Because they've already bought everything else, more or less. Like, you were looking at it and you were thinking, okay, well, Fofana and either Badiashile or Colwill, that'll be the centre-back pairing. They've got Reece James and Malo Gusto, that was set at right back. You had Chilwell, you had Maatsen, you had Cucurella at left back. That's fine. Get yourself a goalkeeper who's ready-made, because they bought Slanina, but he's a couple of years away. And they went out in the summer and they spent nearly 40 million on Robert Sanchez, who just isn't very good. And Jure Petrovic, who I do like, but I don't know that he's a top-level goalkeeper. I don't think he's a title-winning goalkeeper. So they failed to complete the task on that one. They spent 100 million on Moises Caicedo, 23 million on Leslie Ogochukwu. Neither of whom, maybe Ogochukwu could be, but he's not ready to be. Neither of whom are the ideal partner for Enzo. If they'd gotten Ugarte, who they tried to buy, that would have ticked that box, but they didn't tick that box. Caicedo's a very good ball winner, but it's not why you buy Moises Caicedo. He does a lot of other things. It's his ability to hold that defence, hold that midfield from a defensive perspective, not have to chase the ball around. That's what makes him special. So they didn't tick that box. And then up front, I mean, they bought Nicholas Jackson, but he's not a goal scorer. So they didn't tick that box either. They bought David Washington. That's another 45, 46 million spent up front on 2 lads that don't fulfill your need. Everything else was there. You know, it's not ideal, but Sterling, Mudeki, and Mudryk should have been enough on the wing for this season. Maatsen can also play on the wing. They had 3 needs, 3 positions to fill. And yes, Fofana getting injured created another one. They went and they got Disasi at a decent price. That's fine. That ticks that box. But they didn't need to spend anywhere close to the money that they actually spent. And yet they didn't tick any of their boxes that they needed for the summer. Like, this is not a club functioning in the right way. And if I'm one of these people at Clearlake who's invested billions into this club, surely you're making phone calls to Todd Bowley asking, where the fuck is our money going?
I mean, they've I guess you can look at it two ways. One, they're handing out 6, 7, 8 year contracts so they can say, well, we're only 1 year into some of those. So, there's only 12, 15% of the time of what we're going to get from them gone. The other way is to look at it and say, this is a footballer's career. He's not going to last 8 years at the exact same level, and you're not going to get linear direction from all of them. So I think that there definitely will be questions. There obviously have, in fact, been questions asked because they're now being linked with another sporting director or two, another one from Brighton along the way. So maybe recruitment questions are going to be asked in a lot more public ways, shall we say, this summer. I don't think that it makes any immediate difference in terms of Pochettino. I just think that his performance is going to be monitored on improvement from the previous campaign. That's what I still think at the minute. Obviously, taken over effectively from Potter, and has it been a season of improvement? I guess if they finish, let's say, 9th-ish, and they've got to one final, I suppose that is technically an improvement, but they would have to finish the season quite strongly, I think. I do think that he'll still be in place at the start of next year. I know a lot of people don't, but I kind of feel that he will be, because otherwise, what's the difference? Like, who are you going to get in who's suddenly going to make it magically better? Who's going to magically make this squad more together? I think that there are a few players they need to get rid of to make it a different group cohesion, a group dynamic, a bit of a different culture within the dressing room before they can really worry about a managerial change is going to fix things this time, because there's been a lot of those changes and it hasn't fixed anything. So I kind of still lean towards Pochettino can still do better, but has maybe done as much as might keep him in a job. I think that he's underperformed because Chelsea as a whole have underperformed, and he's in the hot seat. But I really don't lay the blame for it at his feet, to be honest.
No, I don't lay the blame for it at his feet at all. I lay the blame at the feet of the ownership and the sporting directors that are there, who've just gone out and thrown money around and assumed that just by bringing together a group of very talented footballers that it was going to work. Football is not just about talent.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes, and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
Like, midfields are about partnerships. They're about complementary skill sets. Same at centre-back. It's not just as simple as saying, oh, well, he's a really good midfielder and he's a really good midfielder, so let's put them together and that's going to be a really good midfield. That might work on FIFA. It doesn't work in reality. The reason our midfield, for example, worked last night, despite the fact we were missing 2 starters, is because Endo and Alexis work really well together because their skill sets complement each other. Because Endo has very similar skill set, a lesser version, but very similar skill set to Moises Caicedo. So that pairing of him and Alexis is very similar to what Brighton were doing last year with Moises and Alexis. Gravenberch has the ability to play going forward. That complements the other two because now they can sit in, they can run the midfield, and they can give him that freedom to get forward and join the attack. And they'll cover for most of the defensive weaknesses. Like, our midfield last night cost us, I think, 86 million. And yet our midfield last night was better than anything they can put together with a midfield that cost them hundreds upon hundreds of million. Because we bought with a plan in place. We bought for specific needs. We bought thinking partnerships, complementary skill sets. And they went, there's a really good midfielder. Look at him. Google, best under 23 midfielders. Enzo Fernandez. We already own him. Moises Caicedo's next on this list, lads. It says here he's worth 100 million. Sure, that's great. Let's go and buy him. Just like very, very silly. Very, very silly approach to how they go about it. And you know what really annoys me? And this is just me because this is how my head works. I've been looking at Chelsea for the last number of years and just wishing that somebody would take over and go, you know what? What we're going to do here is we're going to take advantage of the fact that we've got this incredible academy that churns out endless amounts of talent. And that's what we're going to build with, is that academy. Reece James is our captain. We're going to go and find the next couple of Reece Jameses. We've already got Levi Colwill, so there's a start. We're going to look to build out this way, and we're going to give opportunities to players like Bashir Humphreys, Ian Matson, Lewis Hall, who I don't understand why he's not at the club. Harvey Vale is going to get an opportunity. We might, if we're going to buy, why don't we go and buy Mark Guehi, who knows the club, who cares about the club, who we produced and sold. Yes, it'll cost us to get him back, but he knows what it's about. So let's get him. We want another centre-back. I wonder if Milan would be willing to do business on another one of our centre-backs who would hugely improve us. Because if I could line up a back three with, let's say, Mark Guehi on the right, Levi Colwill on the left, and then as my central centre-back, a player well suited to that role, I've got Fikayo Tomori. Well, that's a really good back three with really good balance. And they will all give a shit. They're not just going to be here because we're throwing out 8-year contracts. They're not going to be mercenaries. Then I've got Reece James at right wing back, Lewis Hall at left wing back. Well, that's an academy-produced back five. Which, yes, Tomori might cost 50 to get back and Guehi might cost 50 to get in. That, to me, is a better use of 100 million than Wesley Fofana, who you knew was injury-prone, and Disasi or Badiashile, who, like, they're good players. I don't think they're any better than Guehi or Tomori. And also, they're not going to have that connection to the club. Like, that's a back five that I think is potentially a title-winning back five that came through their academy. And you could have Matson as the backup for Hall. Yes, you'd need to buy out some depth, but the likes of Bashir Humphreys would be a quality centre-back backup. You'd need to have gotten a Malo Gusto or whoever to be backup to Reece James. But, like, I was really hoping that's the approach they'd take. And yet they're even less committed to pushing academy talent now than they were when Abramovich was there.
Yeah, it does definitely seem like I think that longer term we will see them do that, but then I've thought that for about a decade as well. But I think that the first push here was let's get ourselves a bunch of elite players, get ourselves up to standard where we imagine we deserve to be, and then sort of worry about the additions. It just hasn't happened that way for them, which was painfully obvious from the beginning to everybody on the outside. But ho hum. In a one-off game, I don't back this team to become a team, to do what you need to do to win a cup final. But it is a cup final, and they are obviously very talented players, so they could do. Individually, maybe they don't become a team, but they perform to the best of their abilities, and on the day, they just do it. I do think it's possible, but I don't expect it to be the case this time, especially after what we did to them, and if we just turn up and play as well as we know we can.
So the Liverpool team that played them just over 3 weeks ago, Alisson in goal. Now, we know it will be Queeving. Ali's injured. It would have been Queeving anyway. The back four that played that day, Karl, was Conor Bradley at right back, Ibu and Virgil in the middle, and Joe Gomez at left back. Andy Robertson came on for Joe. Trent came on for Bradley. Trent won't be there for this one. The question I have for you here, because I think Virgil and Ibu are certain to start. Who are the starting fullbacks in this game? Because I think Joe Gomez deserves to start. I think he's been our best fullback this year by a considerable margin. But I do wonder if Jurgen will go Bradley and Robertson because he has Gomez then off the bench as a player that can come in and cover across the defensive line. Now, he could move in-game anyway, but I do wonder if he goes Bradley and Robertson and tries to stretch the pitch a bit and take advantage of the fact that Bradley and Robertson could really hold the width and really give us a threat out wide.
Yeah, I think it might have been just after you left Raw last night when you had to duck out early, but I said the exact same thing. I think Joe Gomez deserves to start, and I don't think he's going to. I think the sub last night, taking Bradley off first, kind of alludes to that, to be honest. I think it'd be incredibly harsh on Joe Gomez to not start the final, but from a tactical perspective, I understand why he wouldn't do. I think Bradley's just had enough of an impact like that at a really high intensity. Obviously, the quality level's been good. That's fine, but that's the most important thing. We wouldn't be having that discussion if he hadn't been. But I do think that the intensity of his game, the speed, the ground that he can cover, and all the rest of it, and the fact that he's already done a good performance against this opposition, I just feel, he'll be in the lineup again. Robertson obviously will be. Like Tsimikas is apparently now, sixth choice fullback? Because Trent wasn't there last night. 2 started ahead of him, and Robbo was on the bench and came on, and Tsimikas still didn't get a look in. So at the very least, he's not one in the equation at the minute.
You have to feel for Costas a little bit because he was playing so well until he got injured.
Yeah, quite a bit, to be honest.
I mean, if it was me picking the team, I would probably pick Gomez at right back, Robbo at left back, and have Bradley as an option to bring off the bench to raise the intensity level late in the game. I don't know that I read too much into the substitution because he's taken him off around the 70 mark in pretty much all of his appearances, if I'm not mistaken. So he doesn't seem to give him the 90 anyway. But I do think he's going to pick him. I do think he's going to pick him to start. I think he'll go Bradley Robertson is my guess, which is harsh, really harsh on Joe Gomez. Like, for me, the choice should be between Bradley and Robertson. And I would probably lean Bradley on current form, though Robbo played well when he came on last night and was good in the first half against Brentford, not so good in the second half.
So Bradley, just to quickly fill in on that, played the full 90 against Union before Christmas. In the League Cup at the start of this year, he played 90 against Fulham in both legs. That was obviously due to
he played 90 in both legs against them. Jeez.
Yeah. Full 90 both. And in the Premier League, he played 68 minutes against Chelsea and against Luton, and 83 minutes against Bournemouth and Brentford. So he has come off in all of his league games, but it's been either the sort of just past the hour mark or just in the closing stages.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe I assume he will start him. I assume he'll reward him. He played both legs of the semi-final. I assume he rewards him with the start in the final. And look, there's absolutely no issue there. Raheem Sterling is still a very good player, so that's going to be a test, assuming it's Raheem who plays left wing for them, or it could be Nicholas Jackson, like you said. Nicholas Jackson will present a different type of challenge because he's a bit more physical and a bit more direct than Raheem, but he's got Ibu on his inside shoulder. You're going to be comfortable. Let's go to the attack before we look at the midfield. My assumption here is that Salah and Darwin were held out of last night because of the weekend. So I'm really hopeful that both of them are good to go. Assuming they are, who's the third forward with them? Is it Diaz? Is it Gakpo? What would you do?
You know what I would do.
I don't know what you do. That's why I asked the question.
Obviously Diaz. Gakpo's not starting the final unless there's nobody else available.
I just wanted you to say it. Yeah, fair. And look, Diaz, big, wide open pitch. Maybe he remembers that he can beat a man and actually goes at Malo Gusto. I really fancy Darwin's chances against this Chelsea backline, at Wembley, especially without Thiago Silva, because they'll play that bit higher. Now, I would fancy his chances against Thiago Silva because, he's just not very good anymore. Right, so we're lined up. Salah, Nunez, Diaz in attack. Midfield then, Karl. Endo will start. Alexis McAllister will start. Who's your third midfielder? Did Gravenberch do enough for you last night?
No.
Would you go Harvey?
No.
I don't know who else you're going with.
There's not anyone I want to go with, to be honest.
Yeah. Here's the thing. My last contribution to Raw last night before I had to go was a rather scathing appraisal of Ryan Gravenberch and his defensive performance last night. And I've gone on Twitter today, and apparently what actually happened last night was that prime Lothar Matthäus played for us in midfield. I'm seeing the word incredible, amazing, brilliant, great performance. Did I miss something? Because I didn't see that. I saw a decent performance on the ball with some lovely flashes of ability and a poor performance off the ball with some horrendous flashes of laziness.
No, I wouldn't put him in any of those aforementioned categories, to be honest. I thought he was actually one of the players who did the game in reverse in terms of Liverpool showing. I thought he was better first half than second half, to be honest. I thought when we raised the tempo and the intensity second half, we kind of bypassed him.
Yeah, he wasn't involved at all in the second half.
No, I think first half, at times, he was one of the ones who was trying to raise the game and get us on the front foot quicker. His use of the ball was pretty good, I think. He was making quite forward-thinking passes and making sure that we were moving into space as well and so on. But no, second half, I thought we bypassed him quite a bit, to be perfectly honest.
I would go Harvey out of the two.
Undeserving?
I think he just deserves it more. Yeah, I do. I think he just deserves it more.
I mean, let's be honest, whichever one starts, the other one's coming on.
Yeah, exactly.
Neither of them are going to get a full 90.
No, neither of them are capable of a full 90, especially in midfield on that pitch. But if last night was an audition for the final, I think Harvey showed a lot more in terms of his willingness to take responsibility, in terms of his desire to make things happen. I think he had 7 key passes last night or 5 key passes last night. obviously got himself yes, like he was just involved. I know first half, a lot of what he tried didn't work out. His set pieces were appalling. And at no point in the future do I want to see Harvey Elliott the assigned corner kick taker or free kick taker. When Alexis and then Robbo took over the corners and free kicks, they improved immeasurably from what Harvey was delivering. But in general play, I thought he was really, really involved and really effective across the 90 minutes. And I just feel like when we don't have Trent, we do lack a little bit of natural creativity. And I think Harvey gives us more of that than Ryan Gravenberch will.
Ultimately, I'm probably fine with whichever one starts. And if I'm guessing, I think Gravenberch will start just on size, which is sometimes where Jurgen has been known to go for his decisions. So I would guess at the Dutchman, but I don't really mind either way. I want to see more from whichever one is starting. That's the truth. But Elliott definitely deserves it more. So maybe I should want him to start because that's what we've often said. We want to see players rewarded for decent performances and impact and all the rest of it. But it's a final. You got to be a little bit selfish about things as well. And ultimately, I don't want either of them starting. I want Curtis Jones back in the team or Dominic Szoboszlai back in the team. Unfortunately, we don't have either of those. So, yeah, I think probably Harvey. But as long as it's not Gakpo as an 8 again, I don't really mind.
That thought did cross my mind earlier. What if he goes Gakpo as an 8? And I really don't want to see that. None of them are ideal, but I would have a preference for Harvey just because I think he offers more. And there's also just more effort level with him. Gravenberch would worry me on that big pitch with his lack of desire at times.
Ambling.
Ambling is a great word for what he does. Like, he just does amble about a lot of the times. And yeah, people are saying, he won more ground duels than Endo and Alexis. Yeah, but he won them in small spaces in the middle of the park. He didn't defend the wide areas, which is his fucking job, which is how they scored and how Ogbena was able to carry a ball 50 yards at one point. That's what we need him to do. That's where Curtis Jones shines. That's where Dominic shines off the ball, is that they do that work. Harvey will at least try and do the work. I do wonder if the right side midfield selection is dependent on the right back selection. Like, if it's Gomez and you've got that size there, would Gomez, Harvey be better balance? Whereas if it's Bradley, the thing here as well, Karl, is if it's Harvey, Alexis is playing left side of the midfield and Harvey's right side. If it's Gravenberch, I kind of feel like he's better on the left side, so Alexis shifts across. I don't really like the Bradley, Alexis, Mo, just from a defensive point of view. I don't know that works quite as well for us.
Yeah, I think it'll be Elliott because he's dovetailed well with Salah as well, to be honest. I think Elliott moving to the right-hand side, Salah coming inside, probably is what we'll see. And because I think Bradley starts as well, Elliott doesn't touchline hug, whereas Bradley can kind of do both, can't he? We've seen him drive into that number 10 sort of spot, but we've also seen him go really, really wide to the byline. So I think that's probably an overall okay mix in terms of how they've done together so far.
Just looking this season. So this season, Harvey has played 34 games with 16 starts. Gravenberch is 30 games with 17 starts. So he has used them about an equal amount.
Yeah.
Gravenberch has played in 4 of our EFL games, starting 3. Harvey has played in all of them and he started all of them. Harvey and Queeveen are the only players to start every game in this run. Jarrell Quansah started 4. Joe Gomez has started 4. Curtis and Gakpo have started 4. So I don't know. Maybe it means nothing, but I'm hopeful it's Harvey. Right. Predictions. I got angry messages yesterday because you suggested a 4-0 and we were 1-0 down at half-time. And obviously we scored 4.
Yeah.
I suggested 3-0 and we won by 3 goals. Both of us were wrong, but both of us were right. So we're taking the win on that one last night. What's your prediction for this game?
I don't think it's going to be a third 0-0 final with Chelsea.
Fingers crossed. I can't watch another one of them.
I'm going to go for 2-1. I'm going to go fairly sensible. It's a final, so I don't think it'll be I'd love to see us absolutely blitz them. Obviously, that goes without saying, but I don't think that's what will happen. But yeah, I think just a nice 2-1 might be fine. 2-0 would probably feel about right in terms of just, this isn't our biggest fish to fry of the season, and let's just get the job done, show them that they can't touch us, get the trophy and get on with the title. But I'll go for 2-1 because we haven't kept loads of clean sheets.
Yeah. I think I'll go 3-1. Just to be different. I'll go 3-1.
Do you think
we get 2 and they have to open up. They get 1 back, but they're really open chasing the game, and we get a 3rd on the counter.
Do you think that there's more chance that we do Klopp Cup final Liverpool and struggle to score and it's 0-0, 1-0, 1-1 kind of score, or that we do Anfield performance again and absolutely blitz them 4-0, 5, whatever it is, whatever scoreline it is, but that we score the 4-5 plus kind of range? Which one do you think is more likely to happen?
I think a real struggle is more likely. For whatever reason, we just in finals tend to a lot of it is that we're running on fumes rather. By the time we get to finals with Jurgen, because it's such an intense style of football. I do note that PremierInjuries.com, not saying that they're a great source of information, but the expected return date for Dominic Szoboszlai is Sunday. Now, I don't think he'll start. I don't think there's any chance he'll start. But if he was on the bench, that could be a big boost. If you could bring him on with 15 to go.
It'd be nice to have someone on there who's over the age of 16, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing which children that I've never heard of are on the bench this weekend.
Dominic named a sub as safeguarder.
Appropriate adult. I think more likely, if you're asking me which is more likely, a 0-0 or a 1-0 versus a 4-0, I think the 0-0 or 1-0 is a lot more likely.
Yeah.
But I do think, even with 5 starters out, as we'll have, or 4 starters out, depending on Dominic, I do think we're capable of blowing them away. We're a much better team than them. We're just a lot more tuned in. And I think the crowd will be fairly raucous in our favour. There's also the factor that Chelsea's record in finals over the last number of years is abysmal. So maybe there's a bit of a psychological thing hanging over them as well. There's probably a lot more pressure on them as well, because this is their only real chance of winning anything. I know they're still in the FA Cup, but this is their chance to win something. Whereas we've got, a lot of irons in the fire. I'm going to say we win 3-1. And I think potentially, it's quite one-sided.
I would absolutely take that. Just get this one done. I think the performance will be fine overall, but I'd like a nice confident performance and a trophy that's, there was no 2 ways about the outcome kind of game.
Yeah, I really don't want another 0-0 and penalty shootout. I really, really don't want that, because it's just horrible. And this is our competition. We've won it 9 times, more than anyone else. Let's be the first to get to 10. And it's at least, I think it can be a big springboard for us flying into the last, what could potentially be 23 games we might have left after this one, which is ridiculous when you consider there's only 3 months left in the season. Right, Karl, have you got anything to plug before we go?
No, I've got to jump on a call, so read stuff. There you go.
Follow Karl Matchett on Twitter @Karl Matchett and read everything he writes. Follow Guy Drinkle @Guy Drinkle, and don't follow me because it just bothers me. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter @AnfieldIndex and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.